The space station floated in the darkness like a small metal island. It was called Orbital Relay 7, and it sat at the very edge of known space. Not many people wanted to work there. It was quiet. It was lonely, and most species in the galaxy thought it was a forgotten place. Park had been living on this station for 8 months. He was a lieutenant in the human Space Corps, and his job was simple. He helped different alien species talk to each other. He fixed small problems. He made sure everyone followed the rules. It was not exciting work, but did not mind. He liked the quiet. He liked watching the stars through the big windows, and he liked meeting new people, even if most of them did not like meeting him. That was the thing about humans. Most alien species found them strange. Humans were too warm. Their bodies gave off heat that made other species uncomfortable. Humans were too emotional. They laughed too loud and cried too easily. They touched each other all the time, which many aliens found disgusting. And worst of all, humans were unpredictable. They did things for no reason. They gave things away for free. They helped strangers without asking for anything back. To most galactic species, this made no sense. Everything in the universe had a price. Everything was a trade. You gave something, you got something. That was the rule. But humans broke this rule all the time, and it made other species nervous. So when the delegation arrived at the station, expected them to ignore him. They were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had been traveling through space for 10,000 years before humans even learned to make fire. They were tall and thin, with silver-blue skin that seemed to glow in certain lights. Their eyes were pale, like frozen water, and they rarely blinked. They moved slowly and carefully, as if every step was planned 100 years ago. They did not like mess. They did not like noise. They did not like feelings. Their society was built on perfect control. Every word they spoke had a purpose. Every action had a reason. They did not smile. They did not cry. They did not touch unless it was absolutely necessary. To them, emotions were a weakness. Feelings were a disease that other species suffered from. They were proud that they had evolved beyond such primitive things. There were 12 in the delegation. They came to the station to discuss trade agreements with 3 other species. Watched them arrive from the docking bay window. They walked in a perfect line, their silver robes flowing behind them like water. Their faces showed nothing. Their eyes looked at nothing. They moved like ghosts. But one of them was different. Her name was, and she was a cultural liaison. Her job was to study other species and help her people understand them. She walked at the back of the group, a few steps behind everyone else. She was shorter than the other, and her silver-blue skin was slightly darker. But the thing that made notice her was the way she looked at things. While the other stared straight ahead, looked around. Her pale eyes moved across the walls, the windows, the people. She watched everything, like she was trying to memorize it all. And there was something in her face that recognized. He had seen it before in the mirror, on his own face during the lonely months on the station. She looked sad. The first few days did not speak to her. He watched from a distance as they went about their business. They attended meetings. They reviewed documents. They spoke in their soft, flat voices about trade routes and resource exchanges. Was always there, always watching, always silent. She never spoke unless someone asked her a question. She never joined the other for meals. She spent most of her free time alone, either in her quarters or on the observation deck. The observation deck was a large room with a huge window that looked out into space. It was her favorite place on the station, and apparently it was hers too. One evening he found her there. She was standing very still, her hands folded in front of her, staring at something in the distance. Walked closer and looked out the window. There was a star out there, but it did not look normal. It was red and swollen, and parts of it were breaking off into space. A dying star had seen them before. In a few thousand years, it would collapse completely and become a black hole or a small, cold rock. But for now, it was burning itself out, putting on one last show for anyone who cared to watch. Stood next to, she did not move. She did not look at him. He was not sure if she even knew he was there. He decided to speak anyway. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice as cold as her eyes, she answered, "It is collapsing. There is nothing beautiful about endings." Thought about this. She was right in a way. The star was dying. Soon it would be gone forever. That was sad, but somehow he did not feel sad looking at it. "Maybe," he said slowly, "but it is still burning. It is still giving light. Even now at the end it is doing what it was made to do. That counts for something." Finally turned to look at him. Her pale eyes studied his face like he was a strange animal she had never seen before. He could not read her expression. They were very good at hiding what they felt, but something flickered in her eyes. Confusion, maybe, or curiosity. "You find meaning in destruction?" she asked. "I find meaning in trying," said. "That star cannot stop itself from dying, but it can keep burning until the very end. It can keep being a star until it cannot be one anymore. I think that is brave." Stared at him for a long time. Then she turned back to the window without saying another word. Stayed for a while watching the dying star with her. She did not tell him to leave. She did not speak again. But she did not walk away either. And for some reason, that felt like a beginning. After that night on the observation deck, started paying attention to. He did not follow her or bother her. He just noticed things. Small things that most people would miss. He noticed that she always walked in the darker corridors. The bright lights seemed to bother her eyes. He noticed that she flinched when people laughed suddenly, like the sound hurt her. He noticed that she held her hands very tightly together when she was nervous, squeezing her own fingers until they turned white. And he noticed that she was always, always alone. The other in the delegation did not seem to care about her. They spoke to her only when they needed information. They never asked how she was feeling. They never invited her to sit with them. To them, she was a tool, useful but not important. Understood loneliness. He had felt it many times in his life. When he was young, his parents worked all the time and he spent most days by himself. When he joined the Space Corps, he was sent to places where no one knew his name. And here, on this forgotten station at the edge of space, loneliness was his constant companion. He had learned to live with it, but he never got used to it. So he decided to do something. Nothing big, nothing dramatic, just small things that might make days a little less empty. Every morning he made sure to walk past her in the corridor and say hello. At first she did not respond. She just looked at him with her cold, pale eyes and kept walking, but he did it anyway day after day. "Good morning," that was all, just those 3 words. After a week something changed. One morning as he passed her and said his usual greeting, she gave him a small nod. Just a tiny movement of her head so quick he almost missed it, but it was something. He started bringing her tea. The station had a small kitchen where humans could make their own food and drinks. Most alien species did not like human food. They thought it was too strong, too flavorful, too messy. But tea was simple, just hot water and dried leaves. Thought might like it. The first time he brought her a cup, she was sitting alone in the common area, reading something on her data screen. He put the tea on the table next to her without saying anything. She looked at it, then looked at him. "What is this?" she asked. "Tea," he said. "It is a human drink. You do not have to drink it, but it is warm. Sometimes warm things help." He walked away before she could answer. He did not want to make her uncomfortable. He did not want her to feel like she had to talk to him or thank him or do anything at all. The next day, he found the cup on the table in the corridor outside his room. It was empty. She had drunk it. Smiled to himself and kept bringing her tea. She never said thank you. She never talked about it. But every time the cup came back empty. And once, just once, he thought he saw her holding it close to her chest, like she was trying to feel the warmth through her fingers. His friend thought he was being foolish. Was an engineer on the station. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a sharp tongue. She worked hard, talked fast, and did not believe in wasting time on things that would not work. "You are wasting your energy," she told one day while they were eating lunch together. "The do-not-do friendship, they do not even understand it. Their whole society is built on transactions. You give something, you get something. That is how they think. They do not have a word for giving without getting." "Maybe they just never had someone show them another way," said. Shook her head. "You cannot change 10,000 years of culture with cups of tea." "I am not trying to change anything," said. "I just see someone who is lonely, and I know what that feels like, so I am being kind, that is all." "Kind," said the word like it was a strange foreign thing. "And what do you get from being kind?" Thought about this question. It was a good question. What did he get? Did not thank him. She did not talk to him. She did not give him anything back. By the standards of most species in the galaxy, he was losing. He was giving away time and effort for nothing. But that was not how it felt. "I do not know how to explain it," he finally said. "But when I see her holding that cup of tea, when I see her nod at me in the morning, I feel lighter, like there is less weight on my shoulders. Being kind makes me feel good, even if I get nothing back. Maybe that is the reward." Looked at him like he was speaking a language she did not understand, but she did not argue anymore. Meanwhile, was struggling with something she could not name. She had been taught since birth that everything had a price. Love was a contract. Friendship was a negotiation. Even family bonds were built on duty and obligation. You helped someone because they would help you later. You were kind because kindness could be traded for favors. But this human did not fit those rules. He said hello every morning and wanted nothing. He brought her tea and asked for nothing. He sat next to her on the observation deck and expected nothing. He just gave and gave and gave, like he had an endless supply of kindness inside him. It made no sense, it frightened her. She started watching him more carefully, trying to understand. She saw him give his food to a young worker who had forgotten to eat. She saw him stay late to help clean a mess that was not his responsibility. She heard him singing quietly while he worked, silly little songs that meant nothing but made him smile. He was constantly giving pieces of himself away, and instead of becoming smaller, he seemed to grow larger, brighter, warmer. Did not understand how this was possible. Among her people, giving without receiving was considered foolish. It was weakness. It was letting others take advantage of you. But this human did not seem weak. He seemed stronger than anyone she had ever met. One night she found him on the observation deck again. The dying star was still burning in the distance, a little smaller than before. He was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, looking out at the endless darkness. She stood there for a long time watching him. Then, slowly, carefully, she sat down a few feet away from him. He looked at her and smiled. Not a big smile, just a small lifting of his lips, a quiet hello. She did not smile back, she did not know how, but she stayed. And in the silence between them, something began to grow, something neither of them had words for yet, something that would change everything. The radiation storm came without warning. One moment the station was calm and quiet. The next moment, alarms were screaming through every corridor. Red lights flashed on the walls. A mechanical voice announced emergency procedures. Everyone ran to the safe rooms deep inside the station, where thick metal walls could protect them from the deadly energy waves. Grabbed and pulled her toward safety. All around them, people were rushing, pushing, trying to get to shelter before the storm hit. He saw moving with the other, her face as calm as always, but her eyes wide with something that might have been fear. The storm lasted only 12 minutes, but those 12 minutes felt like hours. Inside the safe room, sat with his back against the wall and listened to the station shake. The lights flickered. The floor vibrated. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned like it was in pain. He closed his eyes and counted his breaths, waiting for it to end. When the alarms finally stopped, everyone slowly came out of hiding. The damage was not too bad. A few corridors had lost power, some equipment was broken, but no one was hurt. At least not physically. Heard about it an hour later. The delegation had been carrying sacred artifacts with them. These were not just old objects. They were pieces of history. Some of them were 5,000 years old. They contained records of ancient rituals, memories of leaders who had died long ago, symbols that connected them to their ancestors across 10,000 years. The artifacts had been stored in a special room with extra protection, but the radiation storm was stronger than anyone expected. The protective shields failed, and now most of the artifacts were damaged. Some were completely destroyed. To humans, this might not seem like a big deal. They were just old things. They could be replaced, or copies could be made, or people could just move on. But to those, these artifacts were not just objects. They were identity. They were connection. They were proof that their people existed and mattered. Losing them was like losing a piece of their soul. Saw the elders standing in the damaged room, looking at the broken artifacts. Their faces showed nothing, as always, but he could feel the grief in the air. It was heavy and cold, like a fog that filled the whole station. Then he saw. She was standing in the corner, away from the others. Her hands were shaking. Not a lot, just a tiny tremor that most people would not notice, but noticed. He had been paying attention to her for weeks now. He knew what her hands looked like when she was calm, and this was not calm. She was holding one of the broken artifacts. It was a small crystal box, cracked down the middle. Inside could see something that looked like a dried flower, now crushed and ruined. He walked closer slowly, not wanting to scare her. He said softly. She did not look up. "This was my grandmother's," she said. Her voice was flat, but there was something underneath it, something cracking. "She gave it to me before she died. It was the only thing I had from her, the only proof that she existed, that she loved me, that I mattered to someone." She finally looked at him. Her pale eyes were wet. "It is gone," she whispered. "She is gone again." Did not know what to say. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay, but he knew those words would mean nothing. This loss was real. This pain was real, and he could not fix it. So he just stood there with her. He did not touch her. He did not speak. He just stayed, letting her know she was not alone. After a long time, put the broken artifact down and walked away. Her face was empty again, all her feelings locked back inside, but saw the way her shoulders hunched, like she was carrying something too heavy. That night he could not sleep. He lay in his small bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about and her grandmother's gift. He thought about loss and memory, and the things we hold onto when everything else falls apart. And then he had an idea. For the next 2 days disappeared. Saw him only a few times, rushing through the corridors with strange materials in his hands. Old wires, broken glass, pieces of polymer from damaged equipment. He did not explain what he was doing. He barely spoke at all. He worked in his room with the door locked. He did not eat much. He did not sleep much. He just worked, hour after hour, his hands moving carefully, precisely, building something. It was not easy, was not an artist. He had never made anything beautiful in his life. His hands were clumsy and his eyes were tired. He made mistakes. He started over. He threw things away and tried again. But he kept going. On the second night, very late, he finally finished. He sat back and looked at what he had made. It was a flower. Not a real flower, of course. There were no real flowers on this station, but he had shaped it from the materials he found. The stem was made from old wire, bent and twisted into something graceful. The petals were pieces of colored glass, carefully arranged to catch the light. The center was a small piece of crystal, not valuable but bright and clear. It was not perfect. The petals were not all the same size. The stem was a little crooked. The whole thing looked handmade, which it was. It looked human. But it was beautiful anyway, beautiful in its imperfection, beautiful because someone had cared enough to make it. put the flower in a small wooden box he had found in storage. He lined the box with soft cloth so the flower would not break. Then he sat there for a long time, holding the box, wondering if this was a stupid idea. Her people did not give gifts. They did not understand kindness without payment. She might be offended. She might be confused. She might look at this clumsy handmade flower and see nothing but foolishness. But he kept thinking about her face when she held that broken artifact. He kept thinking about her trembling hands. He kept thinking about the words she had said. She is gone again. Had lost something precious. He could not bring it back. He could not fix what was broken. But maybe, just maybe, he could give her something new. Something that said she was not forgotten. Something that said someone saw her, someone cared, someone wanted her to feel less alone. It was not much. It was just a small gift made from trash and hope. But sometimes, small things were all you had. Took a deep breath, picked up the box and went to find. Finding quarters was not difficult. Finding the courage to knock on her door was much harder. Stood in the corridor for almost 10 minutes, holding the small wooden box in his hands. His heart was beating fast. His palms were sweating. He felt foolish. He felt scared. He almost turned around and walked away 3 different times. But every time he started to leave, he thought about her trembling hands. He thought about the broken crystal box and the crushed flower inside. He thought about the way she said, "She is gone, again," like losing her grandmother's gift had opened a wound that never healed. So he stayed, and finally he knocked. The door opened and stood there looking at him. She was not wearing her formal robes. She had on simpler clothes and her silver blue hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked tired. She looked sad. And she looked confused because no one ever came to her door. "Lieutenant Park," she said. Her voice was as flat as always, but her eyes moved to the box in his hands. "This is not appropriate. Your people and mine do not visit personal quarters." "I know," said. "I am sorry. I would not come if it was not important." She stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she stepped aside to let him in. Her quarters were very clean. Everything was in its place. There were no decorations on the walls, no personal items on the shelves. It looked like a room where no one really lived, just a place to sleep and wait for the next day. Turned to face her. His hands were shaking a little now, holding the box. He felt like a child about to give a present to someone who might laugh at him. "I made you something," he said. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Made me something I do not understand." He held out the box. "Please just open it." She did not move for a long time. Among her people, receiving a gift was a complicated thing. It created obligation. It meant you owed something back. It tied you to another person in ways that could be used against you. But there was something in his eyes that made her reach out and take the box. She opened it slowly. Inside, resting on the soft cloth, was the flower. The light from her room caught the colored glass petals and made them glow. The crystal center sparkled like a tiny star. The wire stem curved gracefully, reaching upward like it was trying to touch the sky. Stared at it. Her hands began to tremble. "What is this?" she whispered. Took a breath. "I know I cannot bring back what you lost. Your grandmother's gift is gone and nothing can replace it. I know that, but I thought, maybe a new memory could help, something small. Something that says you were here and someone noticed. Someone cared." His fingers touched the glass petals so gently like she was afraid they would break. Her whole body was shaking now. Not just her hands, everything. "You made this," she said. "It was not a question. You made this for me." "Yes." "Why?" This was the question had been thinking about for days. Why did he make it? Why did he spend 2 days without sleep, cutting his fingers on glass and wire, making something that had no value and no purpose? "Because you looked so sad," he said quietly. "Because you were hurting and I wanted to help. Because I could not fix what was broken, but I could make something new. something that belongs only to you. Looked up at him. Her pale eyes were filling with tears, silver tears bright like starlight rolling down her blue cheeks. "You do not understand," she said, and her voice cracked. It was the first time I'd heard real emotion in her voice, raw emotion, uncontrolled. "My people do not give gifts. We exchange, we trade. Everything has a price. Everything must be balanced." She lifted the flower with shaking hands. "This has no price. This cannot be traded. It cannot be used. It has no value except." She stopped. She searched for words, and for the first time she could not find them. "It has no value except the value you give it," said softly. "That is what a gift is. It is not about balance. It is not about exchange. It is just something one person gives to another freely because they want to, because they care." Was crying now, really crying, tears falling fast down her face. She did not wipe them away. She probably did not even know how. She had never cried like this before, not in 40 years of life, not since she was a child who did not yet know that feelings were forbidden. "Among my people," she said, her voice breaking with every word, "there is a concept we do not speak of, a feeling we consider shameful, a weakness we are taught to kill before it grows. The closest word in your language is longing." She pressed the flower against her chest, holding it like it was the most precious thing in the universe. "Longing," she continued, "to want something that serves no purpose, to need what cannot be justified, to wish for things that make no sense." She looked at through her tears. "I have been longing my whole life," she whispered, "longing for someone to see me, not as a tool, not as a function, just as me, just as someone worth caring about." She took a shaking breath. "And you barely know me. We have spoken only a few times. I have given you nothing. I have done nothing for you, and yet you saw me. You noticed my pain. You spent days making this beautiful, useless, impossible thing, just because you wanted me to feel less alone." She stepped closer to him. She was still crying, still trembling, but there was something else in her eyes now, something warm, something that looked almost like hope. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you give so freely? How do you care about strangers? How do you love without keeping score?" Thought about this question. It was the same question had asked him. It was the same question the whole galaxy seemed to ask about humans. "I do not know how to explain it," he said honestly. "For my people, caring about others is not a transaction. It is just what we do. We see someone hurting and we want to help. We see someone alone and we want to reach out. Maybe it is foolish. Maybe it is weakness, but it makes us feel alive. It makes us feel like we matter, like our lives mean something." He reached out and gently touched her hand. It was cold, like always, but it did not pull away. "You matter," he said. "Your pain matters. Your loneliness matters. And you deserve to have someone care about you, not because of what you can give them, but just because you exist, just because you are you." Looked down at his warm hand on her cold one. She looked at the flower pressed against her heart. She looked at this strange human who broke all the rules she had ever been taught. And she said something she had never said to anyone in her entire life. "Thank you." Just 2 words, simple words, words that her people almost never used because they implied debt and obligation. But in that moment, they meant everything. Word spread quickly through the delegation. One of their own had received a gift from a human. One of their own had cried. One of their own had said thank you. To humans, this would sound like nothing, a small moment between 2 people, but to it was a scandal. The elders called a meeting. All 12 members of the delegation gathered in the main conference room, stood at the center, alone, facing them. The flower was not with her. She had left it safely in her quarters, hidden where no one could take it. Elder spoke first. He was the oldest of the group, with skin so pale it was almost white and eyes that had seen 1,000 years of history. "You have shamed us," he said. His voice was cold and flat like always, but there was anger underneath. "You received a gift from an outsider. You showed emotion in front of a lesser species. You used words that create obligation. Explain yourself. Stood very still. Her hands were folded in front of her and her face showed nothing. She had put her mask back on, but inside something had changed, something that could not be unchanged. I received kindness, she said simply. I responded with gratitude. Kindness? Elder said the word like it was poison. There is no such thing as kindness. There is only exchange. What did he want from you? What did he expect in return? Nothing, said. The elders looked at each other. This answer made no sense to them. That is impossible, another elder said. Every action has a purpose. Every gift has a price. If he asked for nothing, he is either lying or planning something. You have been fooled. She thought about the tea he brought her every day without asking for thanks. She thought about the way he said hello every morning, even when she did not answer. She thought about the 2 days he spent making a flower from trash, just because he wanted her to feel less alone. He is not lying, she said, and he is not planning anything. He gave freely because that is what his people do. They care for strangers. They help without keeping score. They love without calculating cost. That is weakness, Elder said. That is how species fail, how civilizations collapse. Emotion is chaos. Giving without receiving is slow death. Is it? Asked. And for the first time in her life, she questioned her elders directly. We have followed the path of logic and balance for 10,000 years. We have built a great civilization, but look at us. Look at this room. She gestured at the 12 around her. How many of us have true friends? How many of us have someone who would make us a gift just to see us smile? How many of us have cried in 40 years, 100 years, ever? The elders were silent. We have conquered emotion, continued. We have eliminated weakness. And what do we have? Empty lives, cold relationships, perfect loneliness. She thought about the flower in her quarters. She thought about how it felt to hold something made with care and love and hope. She thought about the warmth of his hand on hers. This human gave me something with no expectation, she said. No contract, no balance. And in that gift I felt something I have never felt from our own people. She looked at Elder directly. I felt chosen, not for what I could provide, not for what I could give in return, but just for being me, just for existing. The room was very quiet. That is sentimentality, Elder finally said. It is not logical, it is not sustainable, it is not the way. Perhaps, said, perhaps it is not logical, perhaps it makes no sense, but it made me feel alive. For the first time in 40 years I felt like I mattered, like my existence had value beyond my usefulness. She took a step forward. Perhaps we have misunderstood strength, she said. We taught ourselves that strength means control, that power means feeling nothing, that wisdom means standing alone. She thought about again, how he laughed easily, how he cried easily, how he gave pieces of himself away every day and somehow became more, not less. But the humans are not weak, she said. They feel everything, they give everything, and yet they keep going. They keep building. They keep reaching out across the darkness, trying to connect, trying to help, trying to love. Her voice grew stronger. It takes more courage to offer love freely than to withhold it strategically. It takes more strength to care about strangers than to calculate every relationship. The humans are brave in ways we have forgotten, in ways we were afraid to be. She looked around the room, at all the pale faces watching her. And that, she said, is something we must learn. The elders did not respond. They did not agree, but they did not argue either. For the first time in centuries, I had said something they did not have an answer for. The meeting ended without punishment. The elders left one by one, their faces showing nothing but their silence speaking volumes. Something had shifted, something small, like a crack in a wall 10,000 years old. That evening went to find. He was on the observation deck, of course, sitting on the floor watching the dying star. It was smaller now, dimmer, but still burning, still trying. Sat down next to him, closer than before, their shoulders almost touching. "How did the meeting go?" asked. He had heard about it. Everyone on the station had heard about it. "I said some things that will cause trouble," said, "but I am glad I said them." Smiled. "Good. Sometimes trouble is worth it." They sat in silence for a while, watching the star. "I have decided to stay," finally said. "After the delegation leaves, I want to stay here. I want to learn." Looked at her. "Learn what?" "How to be human," she said. And then for the first time she smiled. It was small and awkward and clearly unpracticed, but it was real. Smiled back. "I can help with that, but I should warn you we are a very messy species. We cry a lot, we laugh too loud, we make mistakes all the time." "I know," said. "That is why I want to learn. I have been perfect my whole life. I am tired of perfect." Laughed. It was a warm sound, filling the cold room with something bright. "Well," he said, "you came to the right place. We are experts at being imperfect." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a cup. He had brought tea again. "Here," he said. "It is a little cold now, but warmth fades. That does not mean it was not worth having." Took the cup. She held it in her hands the way she always did, feeling what little warmth remained. "Thank you," she said. Shook his head. "You do not have to thank me, remember, no exchange, no balance, just a gift." "I know," said, "but I want to say it anyway, not because I owe you, but because you have given me something precious and I want you to know that I see it, I feel it, I will remember it always." She looked out at the dying star. "You taught me that endings can be beautiful," she said softly. "That burning until the end is brave, that small things can change everything." She reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cold, his was warm, they held on anyway. "That flower you made me," she murmured, "it will sit on my shelf forever, and every time I look at it I will remember. I will remember that a human saw me when no one else did, that someone cared enough to create something from nothing, that kindness exists, even in the darkness between stars." Squeezed her hand gently. "That is all any of us can do," he said. "Make small lights in the darkness, hope that someone sees them." Nodded, and together they watched the dying star burn its last fire, giving everything it had to the empty universe around it. Some gifts could not be measured, and those were the ones that changed everything.